Welcome to this explainer. If you're joining us today, chances are you're just like the rest of us, kind of searching for some sense of permanence, right? We live in this incredibly fast-paced, totally unpredictable world, and honestly, just finding solid ground can sometimes feel, well, nearly impossible. Okay, let's dive into this because today we're going to explore this really profound concept that hits right at our fundamental human need for stability. We're looking at some amazing source material that explores the idea of Jehovah as our immutable rock. We'll unpack all the layers of this ancient imagery and figure out exactly why it's resonated so deeply with people for literally thousands of years.
Let's be real. We live in a world where unexpected challenges can disrupt or even completely upend our lives in a split second. I think we can all relate to that kind of chaotic reality. It's like one phone call, one sudden event, and bam, everything shifts. And in those crazy moments, we humans have this deep, almost instinctual need to reach out to something greater, just for some reliable support and help. The source material points out that when people turn to Jehovah God for that help, and they actually receive his support, it's just incredibly reassuring. It actually leads to this very specific, powerful declaration found in Psalm 18, verse 46, which simply says, Jehovah is alive.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the totally jarring paradox here. Think about it. On one hand, you have King David, who is experiencing this divine support, joyfully declaring, Jehovah is alive. He's acknowledging this super vibrant, active presence. But then, literally in the exact same breath, right after making that declaration of vibrant life, he turns around and calls God my rock. He deliberately pairs a statement of life with a completely inanimate, lifeless object.
I want us to just pause for a second and really think about this. Why would David liken Jehovah to an inanimate object? I mean, a rock doesn't breathe. It doesn't move. It certainly doesn't speak. So why use this specific imagery for a God you just said is radiantly alive? It's not a typo in text, and it's definitely not a lack of vocabulary on David's part. It's a highly deliberate, calculated choice meant to communicate something huge. Let's explore exactly how this linguistic tool actually works.
So calling God a rock is what we call a classic word picture. The Bible uses these word pictures all the time to help our finite human minds wrap around these massive, infinite divine qualities. By pointing to a physical object that we can literally see and touch, like a massive immovable boulder or a giant sheer cliff face, the text helps us instantly grasp qualities like unrivaled permanence, ultimate security, and unwavering stability. When David says, my rock, he's absolutely not saying God is lifeless. Actually, scratch that. It's more like he's saying God's reliability is just as absolute and unchanging as the very bedrock of the earth itself.
And this brings us to a really fascinating point about how this metaphor is used to show God's unmatched nature. In Deuteronomy 32, verse 31, we read, their rock is not like our rock. Look at how this imagery is used here as a direct comparative statement to explicitly praise him as a God completely without equal. Other people might have things they rely on, right? Like wealth or human leaders or maybe just sheer luck. But the text argues that the stability of all those things is just completely unmatched by the absolute permanence of Jehovah. His stability is literally in a class of its own.
Let's move to and see how this builds by checking out its historical roots. Over in Deuteronomy 32, verse 4, we actually find the very first reference in the Bible to Jehovah as the rock. It establishes this amazing foundational theme that just echoes throughout the rest of the text. By introducing this word picture so early on, it really sets a precedent for exactly how stability and divine reliance would be understood by generations and generations to come.
And we see that legacy continue so powerfully over in 1 Samuel 2, verse 2. This one is from the prayer of a woman named Hannah. In a moment of just deep personal triumph and intense gratitude, she echoed this exact same word picture, stating, there is no rock like our God. What we're seeing here is this incredibly powerful consensus of scriptural authority. Across entirely different eras, facing completely different life circumstances, these individuals all independently arrived at the exact same visual metaphor to describe their personal experience of divine stability.
And this brilliantly illustrates our next point. The prophet Habakkuk in chapter 1, verse 12 very simply calls Jehovah my rock. Now, keep in mind, Habakkuk lived during an incredibly turbulent, frankly frightening time in history. Yet, he relied heavily on this undeniable imagery as his own personal source of unchanging stability. For him, this wasn't just some abstract theological concept. No way, it was deeply personal. It was my rock. It was literally the solid ground he stood on when everything else in the world around him was shaking.
But honestly, here's what I think is the absolute ultimate proof of this metaphor's importance.
Up until now, we've only seen humans, David, Moses, Hannah, Habakkuk, using this word picture. But over in Isaiah 44, verse 8, even Jehovah himself uses this specific inanimate object to describe his own immutable nature. It is such a striking moment of self-revelation. The very source of life itself reaches right down into our human physical vocabulary and says, essentially, hey, if you want to understand my permanence, just look at the rock.
So that brings us to really the most important question of this entire explainer. How do we actually apply this incredible stability to our lives today? I mean, it's great that we've traced this word picture all through history, but how does it help you and me right now? When we're the ones facing unexpected challenges, when the phone rings with bad news, or the economy takes a nosedive, or our health suddenly falters, how can we find real personal comfort in this ancient imagery?
So, the crucial point is beautifully summarized right here in Psalm 73, verse 26, which says, God is the rock of my heart. Isn't that amazing? It brings the immense, ancient scale of a giant mountain right down into the intimate center of human emotion. Even if your physical strength fails you or the world around you gets completely unpredictable, there can be this bedrock of stability inside you, in your heart, if you anchor yourself to that immutable rock. Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought. In a world where absolutely everything is subject to change, are you building your life on shifting sands, or are you anchoring yourself to the rock of the heart? For more information, please visit jw.org. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and press bell icon to get the notification for new video.